Yes, Veda. So we are live now and Shravan will begin.
Yeah. So I can press me. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon and welcome to KRVIA Encounters. Veda Thozhur Kolleri is a visual artist living between Pattiam, Greater Noida and Vadodara. She works for drawing, video, photography and writing. She's interested in the ecological context in which she lives and works, and through her practice is attentive to processes of sedimentation, decay, accumulation, and growth. She has a close relationship with the plants and animals in her environment, which drives her to actively engage with the natural world and work with it. Veda was a participant in the fourth edition of the Kochi-Muziris Biennale in 2018 and a fellow at the Home Workspace Programme 2018-2019 at Ashkal Alwan, Beirut, for which she received a scholarship from the Inlaks Shivdasani Foundation. She has a BA in Anthropology and Psychology from the St. Xavier's College, Mumbai, an Undergraduate Diploma in Art and Design from Srishti School of Art, Design and Technology, Bengaluru, and an MFA from Shiv Nadar University, Dadri. Veda?
Hello. Yeah.
To KRVIA Encounters.
Is this? I can't hear you too well. Is this?
Hello.
Hello?
Shravan, I think your internet is not problem.
Is this my internet or is this on the other end?
No, it's on the other end.
Okay.
Let's see. Or here.
So should I wait?
Yeah, Veda, you can go ahead.
Okay, I can go ahead. So I will begin. I'll start sharing my screen. So hello everyone. It's always nice to present in an unfamiliar context because, you know, each time one talks about these things differently and it's always a challenge as to how one can really articulate these ideas. And yeah, I hope I'm able to sort of articulate myself in an appropriate way that sort of communicates across this medium and other mediums involved. So I will be talking about the processes that make up my practice, where the body of work itself is an incidental accumulation of material ideas that result from gestures that mostly gather momentum through a sustained engagement. And I think for me, I've always needed to understand the context of my surroundings in order to even be able to occupy it in a comfortable way. And since one is constantly moving between spaces where one works, lives, and so on, one is always an outsider to these spaces. And so there's this insecurity of not knowing enough about it in order to even be able to say anything about it or form a commentary or respond to it in any way. So that's the point at which I usually begin. And I've found that the safest way to begin this process is through drawing because it seems like a minimally kind of intrusive way to do so. And it's sort of it's a silent process, and it sort of helps you kind of calmly navigate certain spaces. So mostly I'll try and tie up these. I'll begin by introducing to you some of my installations from the past, and then I'll go on to sort of show you the kind of images I'm interested in, or the things that I'm influenced by in the environment, and how that leads to drawing, and how that drawing and the explorations of drawing, how the drawing itself evolves and how this evolution sort of leads to a larger body of work. So this is an installation from Kochi, from the Kochi Biennale. So I was given this space and invited to show in it. And so this room is located right behind it is the sea. And these are objects that I had made during my MFA actually. And they made of plaster. There's plaster molds, plaster casts, and a lot. They have organic objects that I found that were discarded on campus, and objects that I collected from my walks. So these objects have been embedded in plaster in this futile sort of naive attempt at trying to preserve it, and then there's always again this interest in trying to tie up these different objects, and mostly they're drying, decaying objects that are going to perish. So, this sort of futile attempt at embedding it in plaster and then watching it rot within that plaster cast, So this is part of, these objects in this image are from those explorations. And I propped them up on iron stands to sort of give it a space of, where it gets lifted off the ground rather than and give it some significance. So it's lifted off the ground at two different levels, and it gains an importance, even though they're just objects that otherwise would have been discarded. So this is part of that. This is another view of the same installation, where this, which also shows this video projection. So this was a video that I took right behind this room of the sea, the water weathering a rock. So what I did here was I poured plaster onto the seashore. So then some of the shells that were on the sand sort of got stuck to the plaster along with the sand as well. So it was this strange looking object, formless kind of object, made of plaster and shells and sand. So it kind of looked a lot like the rock that I had taken a video of. So I placed it on the floor and projected this video over it. So what it did was it kind of, and all of these are not necessarily conscious. They're just things that happen quite intuitively and and spontaneously. They aren't necessarily things that have they're not necessarily things that are planned. So what ended up happening was it was almost as if this thing is the rock itself is popping out at you, despite being like a flattened two-dimensional projection. And I think another thing so I'll just kind of show you, all of these images look sort of similar in that they're lit in a similar way, and the objects, the pieces that are within the room are similarly composed. So there's this interest in sort of staying in these spaces. This was in the basement car park at the KNMA in Noida. This was part of my final MFA display. So there's always like a long duration, long in the sense that, like, say, about a month to 20 days of staying in a space and using the space as a studio to conceive of these ideas. So there's this inhabiting of the room in which one is going to show in, and then slowly the space kind of builds and you start filling them with objects. It's sort of, I view this part of it as a very important part of the process, and again of organizing one's thoughts and ideas, because it's sort of like putting together a home in a sense, Here again, this was so there's always like an element of video. There's an element of I've collected soil from the locality. In this case, it was I think it was it was again in Noida, I think close to the river. Here it was soil that was used in the construction of the highway on the Grand Trunk Road. And here I collected soil again. There was the use of sand, which was from the beach right behind it, the sea area right behind it. So this was, and this is an image of the installation in Beirut. So here again, I was doing this like an extension of my explorations with soil, but here what became a significant element that came in was of water and how the relationship between soil and water. And it was also following the floods in Kerala, I was in Kerala when the 2018 floods happened. So it was an extension of, it stemmed from that the whole disaster, urban kind of the issues that came up, the kind of discussions that were being had about why these floods happen, even the Chennai floods. And then again, so I was thinking of this, how water draws attention to itself in times of scarcity and when there's a flood. So there's this excess or the scarcity that draws attention to that, through which it draws attention to itself. Otherwise, it's just something that we take for granted. So this engagement with, again, this interest in water is something that continues even today. This was, I think now 2 years ago. So I still work around the subject of water and how these elements sort of mix and merge. So here there's one, you can't see my pointer. Okay, so there was one, there's like instances of, so I dried soil on pieces of fabric. So there was like different quantities of water that was poured onto soil on fabric, and so they set differently. And in another, there was a tank with, I think you can see it in the corner, there's a tank with water in it and soil that would settle in as sediment. So I used an Arduino powered pump to constantly disturb the water as the sediments would settle. So it was timed in that way. And again, there was a video projection through these pieces of glass. You'll see the images of the glass further on in the presentation. So I just wanted to take you through these images to give you a sense of what the final outcome, so to speak, sort of ends up looking like. And then I will, I will take you through what the kind of images that influence why I do what I do. So this is again a very close-up image of the Haldi Ghati along the Aravalli range in Rajasthan. And so again, this is like the rock that has been weathered due to various reasons, also mining, I suppose, made the making of the road. And then here what the interest, so these are just images. I'm sort of giving them meaning now. They're just images that I would take in the moment, but I'm sort of obviously thinking back as to why in order to express these ideas. So this is again here. My interest in this would be like the spread of the green and how it sort of consumes this land that is that's not being used. So the way this spread happens and how it sort of gets eaten up. This is of sandstone at, I think it's the flooring at the ground at Sanchi Stupa. So these sort of drawings that exist in the outside world without, I mean, it's just the kind of images that I'm interested in how these images get made without being drawn, So then I think to a large extent there is also this attempt at trying to imitate these formations through drawing, which we'll go on to see later. So here it's like the sea sort of spills into this built area, and then, I mean, when there's a high tide, it sort of floods in, and so it creates this sort of stain. And then again, it's also like, you know, another thing is in this image, for instance, like is that water is something that sort of it happens so quickly, you don't necessarily it's a hard thing to draw. So, you know, it's through this repeating sort of flooding up of this area. It's not really a flooding, but, you know, this water spilling into this area that kind of causes this stain, and this stain becomes a drawing in a sense, you know. So and it captures the movement of water. So it's this challenge in trying to capture the movement of, I mean, my interest is in this inability to capture the movement of water, and different ways to sort of come at that, you know, to come at that image, to arrive at that image. And yeah, and it's also like I think I'll I'll explain more as we go along. This is again, it's the sand in a desert, and it's the wind that's caused these formations and these patterns. So it's basically here again, and like water, it's like these are things that sort of need another medium, need a surface in order to make themselves visible. So, or make what they do visible. So it's how so then how this interaction of two things that sort of produces this image. Here is the cracking of water. I don't know why is my Siri, come on. Hold on. Yeah. So this is an image of, again, the drying up of water, and it's like it's become clay. The soil, it's in a clay part of the earth. So it's formed these cracks. So this formation of cracks, again, this thing of drying up. I think later on, this is something that I did. I allowed this to happen, where within a glass tank, I made a fine layer of sand, poured in water, let it evaporate, let it form these cracks, and this became part of the installation in Beirut. These again are these are the plaster casts from the Kochi images that I showed you, and in some instances. So again, it's like here I was trying to take casts of these tree bark bits that I had found on campus, and then the parts of the bark got stuck to the plaster. So I removed what was possible to remove, and then I left other parts there as is. So then you have like a recall of what the cast is of, you know. And so in some instances the wood bark is left in the mold, and in others it's a clean kind of, you know, cast. Here I attempted it with paper, so paper mache. Here is again I embedded a piece of cut wood that into a brick of I set a brick of plaster with this cut wood as in it was a log that had been cut from one of the trees that had been cut. So I set a brick around it, and so the bark, the wood kind of absorbs the wetness of that is involved in the plaster process. So it absorbs this, and then it kind of the plaster, once the plaster is dry, it sort of absorbs the moisture back in. So this absorption sort of created a crack in the brick. So then I cut along that crack with a table saw, and that's what you're seeing here, where you're seeing a cross section of the thing. So it's like how in this instance, I'd say it's like how it sort of it's removed from its context, brought into a new context, and how this sort of tracing of its trajectory kind of continues in a sense. These were again like small things that I was just doing just to sort of loosen up, in a sense, exercises for myself to loosen up, where they'd always sweep up the leaves in this area. So then I just arrange the leaves in a particular way, and it just makes people stop and look, it makes you kind of slow down when you see something like this. So it was just something that I was doing in order to loosen up. Again, I did a similar thing in a similar area with the lawn, with the grass that had been cut, the mowing of the lawn. So again, it's this thing of using the discard to sort of come up with something else, and not necessarily treat all of these things as things to be discarded, basically. This again, here it's like, again, all of these, what I'm showing you here is all explorations in trying to, understand how these materials behave. So this is, I put a lot of soil and water and poured it over paper and sort of just moved the paper around. So this is what you see here and here. And then it's like how it sort of creates something of a landscape, These are more recent things that I'll go on to talk about later on, but these are, again, explorations with water. And here, this is a drawing of this column, or like in Kerala, these step wells or community pools. So I was trying to draw the water in it, and then it started to rain. And generally, like how one draws water was the thing that I was sort of thinking about while doing these. This is again something that I left out it's just like I spread ink on paper and left it out in the rain, in the thunder, and then had the rain kind of do what it wanted to the paper, and sort of it gets layered by that. So it gets wet once, then I layer it with ink again, and then gets wet again, and then I layer it with ink again, and gets wet again. So I'm also interested in this thing of layers and sort of, these are, again, so like the earlier image of the rock that I showed you. So here I'm sort of looking at the deepest crevices on these rock surfaces. That's also like, I suppose, the kind of the darkest lines. This is what I was kind of reducing. Initially, I was beginning to draw, when I draw a surface, I begin to draw the darkest lines. So here, I decided to not go too much into detail and sort of leave it just at the darkest lines. So these are just the darkest lines of certain bark surfaces. And bark and rock, I suppose. And then here is one level deeper where I've drawn the object that you see in the image. And just like it's sort of like a quick sketch. I'm trying to, again, understand this, and it's something that I found at a beach. And it's an oldish shell, which has been layered by all sorts of things. And this is the same image, the same shell blown up into a much bigger size and drawn differently, with a different amount of attentiveness to its surface, more amount of time given to it. And this is again the same thing, and focusing on a different part of it. So it's like a zooming in further and further, and it's like, and for me at least, it's something that happens through experiencing, through drawing anything, it applies to anything. So it's sort of, it's almost like a step-by-step process rather than skipping the steps and trying to get to an end. It's like a thing of having a deepening understanding of something that I'm interested in. Again, a similar process with this here, where it's you can see it. And then this again, the surface. So it also, then here there's the recall of larger landscapes. So it's this macro thing of how, you zoom in, it sort of turns into a landscape. of something else. So this is a drawing of a termite infestation that happened in my drawer. So it was one of the pieces of the drawer that was still intact in some sense. And this similarly, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, this is again a drawing of actually this. So it's again this thing of, you know, zooming in, zooming out. And then comes this process, I mean, this thing of layering. So again, so here what you see is like those line drawings, the darkest lines that I'd shown you, the deepest crevices. So I've kind of drawn that on a glass surface, and so I engraved it on a glass surface. So then you see the drawing more as shadows. So again, it's sort of it's a recall to the, you know, it kind of in being seen as shadows, it's sort of something that I associate with that depth of the crevice rather than, you know, like leaving it at the level of just line, which is how it would be seen if you don't necessarily know the association. So here it's again, so I took place the line drawing over this, so place the deepest crevices over this drawing of the object, and sort of to try and layer it, and placed it out in the sun to just do its thing. So here, this is a video. The sound isn't so important in this one. I can. So here again, as like the thing that I was talking about, water. Here I was trying to. So in the experience of trying to draw the sea, for instance, like the waves are always, I mean, the water's always moving and the waves are sort of coming at you. So and when you start a drawing, it's always, it needs a stationary point, and then that first point that you begin with becomes the reference for the rest of it. But then in an instance where this thing is moving towards you, I found that, you know, my drawings were getting over as the wave would reach the shore. So what I did was then try and layer these different attempts at drawing the sea. So I drew this on tracing paper and placed them one over the other. So it sort of does it gives the entire kind of movement, the image of the movement, or how much it does rather, over a period of time. In this instance, it's like, I think, over 7 minutes or something. So it kind of gives you a sense of how much the water actually does in such a short span of time when you see the lines kind of accumulate. So this was a video I took just to try and see the different ways in which I could show these drawings. And I thought that, you know, this was one way that worked. I haven't really used this for anything just as yet, but it's just something that I think it was a kind of breakthrough moment in my head. And so I use it again to talk about the kind of things that I'm interested in. So as the layers build up, it becomes harder to see the ones below, you know, so that thickening, layering. So here is a kind of a close-up of the projection on the plaster that I mentioned earlier. So it's this weird barnacled kind of surface it's a video, so the water splashes over it. So, it looks like the water is weathering this. And the sound of the video was also amplified. So it was like you hear the actual sea and then you hear it again within this room amplified. So it was doubling, Here is the line drawing and a video again projected through it. So in these glasses, you don't necessarily, see the lines very clearly unless you look closely. So in being lit up with again, this was a video of water passing through this small little vent. And so and then I kind of saturated the video to the point that it was highly saturated, so it was reduced to just black and white. And so the light on the video was lighting up the drawings, and then you also encounter the drawings as shadows within the room, and also the entire the glass ends up reflecting the projected image onto different parts of the ceiling. So you see this broken up, scattered sort of image of water moving all around in different parts of the room and in different ways. So it's like the movement of water engraved on the glass, it's the reflection of water moving, the image of water moving projected on a wall and projected on this tiny piece as well, and also reflected in different parts. So it's just this slow kind of, spread, but a fragmented one. And then here again, it's like how the thing looks on its own, just as shadows. So it's again engraved glass with like a regular bulb that allows it to be, that gives it the shadow. 2 bulbs, so that's why you see a double shadow. So that's also an interesting, a fun thing for me, where these things kind of double up. And so this is an installation that the most recent one in Alopi. So here are these drawings that I'd shown you. They kind of placed on the floor itself, and then these glass engravings are placed on them, with iron stands. So the drawings kind of get layered, and then you see the shadows as well. And then I'll show you and then there's a video projection, which I'll show you. Here is how I kind of showed at this. I'm showing at this exhibition the layered drawings, where it's just a light box, and all the drawings are kind of stacked on it. So there are 2 like this in this installation. One is of a termite infestation, and the other is of water. So this is where once the projected image sort of reflects on the glass. So these things on the floor, and then the projected image on the video projection on the wall, and then this reflects. So you don't necessarily see the drawings so clearly, you're kind of seeing it in darkness and some light. And so there's also this interest in like darkness in light and light in darkness, And here is the video. We'll play it. And here again, these are just concluding slides to I'll show you, it's a piece of text which has been written based on the experience of attempting to draw water. So I will, here, I can't read the whole thing out, but it's sort of an attempt at kind of textually representing the experience of drawing, the visual experience of drawing, doing it in words, because there's always this issue with, for me at least, this issue with language and how best to kind of articulate a work of art or an engagement like this in words, without sort of seeming too self-conscious or trying to make it a thing. So if you're interested, if anyone is interested, I can send the link to this piece of text. But yes, I think I'm done. I realize I don't know if I shared the audio as well. But yeah, thank you.
Hello. Yeah, sorry. So I think, thank you for the presentation. That's absolutely fantastic. You can share the link of the file in the chat if anyone would like to read it. They can. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was absolutely wonderful. I now invite Sushmita, who's studying in the postgraduate department for urban design, to please take the conversation forward.
Thanks, Shravan. Thank you, Veda, for such a wonderful presentation. It was quite fascinating to see everyday, like the way you interpret everyday phenomena and like as simple as like withering of a stone or movement of waves into through your lens. Like it was very interesting to see all these phenomena through your lens, and it was quite interesting to see how you make meanings through your representations, through your drawings. That was quite interesting. Then also the way you reflect on like on the patterns in the surrounding ecologies, like so sensitively, and being so observant about like these phenomena which takes place in our surroundings, and creating your own meanings from these phenomena. That was a very intriguing part of your entire presentation. And also as architects, we often like most of us often perceive materials like from a perspective of studying its capacity and maybe to understanding its strength. But it was really very interesting to see the way you perceive materials, and like it was so artistic of experimenting with those materials and seeing how it changes its form, and the way you layered it and things. So yeah, it was really very interesting to see the entire presentation and your take on this. I'd like to open up for the questions right now, and if anyone has any questions for Veda, we can take them right now. Yeah, Karan.
Yeah. Hi, Veda. Actually, if you remember, we were in the school together in Navrashna.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, great. So I have three questions which are not necessarily interrelated, but I'll still try to tie them up together and present as one. The first is that I sort of noticed that in your body of work and the kind of things that you're interested in, people, and for the lack of a better word, the human society was missing. So is it something that does not interest you? Uh, like people, human society, and so yeah, you can answer this first, and then I'll ask the other two more interrelated questions.
It's nice that you ask this question because this is also something that I ask myself. No, but actually, initially, when I was studying, I actually began a very people-centered sort of process. So this process comes from, so when I was talking about contexts and sort of entering a new context, a big part of a space is the people that occupy it, the people that inhabit it. So I used to use at that point, I used to use drawing as a means to, I mean, I used to just draw, and I used to, so then when you're drawing in a public space, a lot of people come to you and ask you, what are you doing? And can you draw me? And that was a very common request. So I started drawing portraits of people. And this was how all of this actually began. So I used to draw portraits of them and then I'd give it to them, because they'd ask for it. Draw my child, draw my this, draw my that. So that's kind of how it began. And I think what happened, and it was for, I think it was for 2 years that I was working in this way. So then I was sort of trying to see drawing and this whole process of drawing portraits also as an icebreaker to kind of enter a space and communicate with the people in a way that isn't like an interview format, and then get into conversation and build relationships with people through this engagement. So I think over time, I mean, various things happened, and slowly, I think I started to feel. I mean, it was a mural project actually, and for 2 years or 1.5 years. So what was beginning to happen was a lot of what people would say would kind of pressurize the work that I would make, because it was a public. I mean, it was a project based in public spaces. So I think it was following that experience that slowly, even I also moved to a less inhabited place. So it was more like walking through forests, walking through national parks and that kind of thing, where there's barely any people. So that quiet kind of seems to have taken over, which is why I think so. It's more like from moving from a very urban context. I don't think I've lived in or worked in such an urban context since then, actually. So it's sort of from being in that urban context and moving into like suburban or even like it was a wetland area where our campus was. So, moving into these parts that sort of gradually made it a more kind of less figurative engagement, less about people and more about kind of silently just being and dwelling, So, yeah.
And the sort of second and third question which I will ask as well is that apart from exhibiting at venues, at different venues which you are invited to, what are the other forms or other platforms through which you have tried to or are interested in sort of showing your work to sort of people? And secondly, number one, are you interested in or is there a way through which you are monetizing your body of work?
No, the monetizing isn't happening. Not yet.
Can you please switch off your...
Yeah. No, so monetizing hasn't really happened as yet. Apart from, I think like for especially during this time and especially during the past year, it has been a totally kind of, and it has been a good opportunity in terms, I mean, a good space in terms of even really understanding what one does and building, like developing a discipline in one's work, where like there's barely been any opportunity, so to speak, because of this whole scenario we're in. So it's been like just how do I explain it? This not being tied to an institution or not having to work for a particular, based on a particular kind of expectation, however free it may be or however free the the space may claim it may be, is like there's always this thing of having to, you know, use certain words or use a particular language that is received well, you know. And what I've felt over the past, or what I've experienced or gotten to experience, and I really value it over the past however many past year or so, is this thing of totally being not giving a damn, you know, because there's nobody watching, there's nobody looking, and there's nobody that's really interested necessarily. So it's just like being able to move across ideas, across thoughts, and not having to kind of restrict oneself to even a particular medium or even to a particular theme. So you kind of can, one day you can be doing this, and then that leads you to something entirely different, and you're not so afraid of trying to frame it and fit it all into one box, you know. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if it answers your question, but it's just, I don't remember what your question exactly was, but I know that this relates to something that you were asking, you know?
Yeah. No, so yeah, it does answer my question. Actually, what I asked you was that what are the different ways through which you are trying to reach out? You probably don't want to reach out, but you might want to show your work to sites.
Yeah.
Beyond or apart from the exhibition venue.
Yeah.
And the second question was, are there ways to monetize it? But I guess that's not something you probably are exploring at the moment.
Yeah, no, it's not.
Right.
Yeah. It's also awkward to do, hard to do. It's not what one is trained to do either, you know?
But thanks a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, we can take our next question. Yeah, George.
So I was just seeing your work, and I was like, I was awestruck basically, okay, because I think your work really moved me the way you transition from seeing and experiencing the scenario, the found situation, okay, into a drawing, and then suddenly there was a departure from the real into a realm of I would say a dream, into a realm of into another realm. So I felt that I was quite. I think also why of the question, or rather not a question, or maybe a thought. Okay, a lot of us as students here, this transitioning, okay, from an idea from something that I'm witnessing or I'm experiencing, the transitioning of that, okay, both bodily and also is a process, okay. And so I want to understand the time and the time and the processes that you engage with. Okay, they are never probably the same every time when you engage with a new subject or a new situation. So, but how do you gauge that? I mean, like how do you gauge that? It is now probably an intuitive way of doing it. For a lot of these students, we are trying to probably train them to develop an intuition to design, and an intuition through transitioning an idea into a reality, and all of that done through the process of making and drawing. So if you could just elaborate that, which is also might be interesting to just establish maybe how did this whole thing begin with, your whole, I would say, rather lack of a better word, a career as an artist. How did it all begin, and how are you probably in a more comfortable space now, and how the act of drawing enabled that transitioning?
Yeah. Nice. Everyone's asking nice questions, things I would like to talk about actually. So it's actually, I don't know, how did it begin? It has always kind of been there because both my parents are artists. So, since I was a child, there was this, it was encouraged that me and my sibling, it was encouraged that we kind of explore the environment, left free to do so. So it sort of, at one level, it begins there, one could say. But then at a more, if I were to frame it from this education and career point of view, or my own education and career point of view, I'd say it's only something that has developed. It's a sense that has developed through experiencing experience, you know. So you kind of say you have one project and you work on it, and then you have another project and you work on it, and then there's a pattern that kind of recurs in how you approach certain things from project to project, you know, and that pattern sort of reveals itself, and then you start to do it more consciously. So at one point I remember I was always very intimidated by this thing of having to write a proposal. And I'm like, how can I write a proposal when I don't know what I'm going to do? I haven't seen the space. I haven't done this. It's never been done before. But what I've learned now is it actually doesn't matter. I don't need to see the space. I know a certain pattern in which I work. And the proposal is merely like a backup plan in case everything flops. I have something to fall back on. So that, you know, so the process of proposal writing, I feel, is something that has actually helped me, you know, where then I'm forced to articulate or express my ideas in this. I mean, it has made me kind of had to conceptualize these little engagements, and which part of the process they kind of come in, at which point in the process do they come in, and sort of then give it a kind of a timeline, so in a sense, and just sort of vaguely put that forward. So yeah, it has. I think it's something that one just gets a sense of through, you know, seeing how you work, being comfortable with seeing that you're more comfortable doing something a particular way than another way, and just kind of going with that rather than let too much noise confuse the you know, it's like not putting too much pressure on the outcome, and kind of just going with the process and the feeling of the process, and trusting that it will take you to a good place, you know. So the urgency in the moment is not really the end, but that stress, the pressure is on sort of really doing this part of the process well, and then this part of the process well, you know, for oneself.
But also always, I mean, this happens with us. So other images influence us. I mean, and right now we are in an age where images are being thrown at us at every second, be it through various social media. But I think that it's a thing to probably also disengage and to distance yourself from sometimes from your own work, to be able to see it as an outsider. And I think that is so each of these processes lead to some form of representation or a drawing method. So it is not, and I'm thinking that you're using this chance as a process, right? And then that is the method of medium for you to work. You start off, but always there are going to be other influences from other works, images that you see. Do they trickle in sometimes? You know, because I'm seeing that in some of your work, you know, sometimes you can superimpose your work with somebody else's work, and you know, and you see similar kind of patterns of engagement and the output. You know. So does that happen? I mean, would be happening? I don't know. I'm asking you.
I'm definitely kind of influenced by images, to the extent that I like looking at images, and there are certain images that say, you know, stay in my mind. And I just say if we're talking about online, I bookmark those images, you know. But I don't actually, and this has also been a bit of a problem in university. I've not necessarily taken too much of an interest in other artists' work unless I engage in a conversation with them, you know. And just because I'm not able to necessarily look at, I mean, there are exceptions, of course, but I can't always look at a final image and be impressed by just that final image. I'm interested in what it took to get there, and then the kind of thought processes that it took to get there, and engage in that conversation before I can fully trust where that final outcome came from, you know. So I wouldn't say that I encounter people's work in the form of images. I'd rather visit it in person, or visit it through a conversation with the maker, or you know, someone who's very familiar with it. So yeah, so of course, like I think I mean, there are bound to be parallels
Yeah. True. Thanks,
Yeah.
thanks, Veda.
Yeah. Thank you. Hi.
Hi, Veda. So lovely to see your work. And it's very, very beautiful. And I think all of us enjoyed immersing ourselves in the videos and looking at the drawings. Uh, I wanted to ask you actually about like a larger, sort of thematic I feel in the work, that there seems to be some, this idea of the trace, that is that the drawing is a trace, or images of traces, that there seems to be some kind of idea of the ruin, as something that has collected traces of actions or weathering or things like that. And somehow I feel also that it is in a larger sense also some idea of the kind of relationship that we have right now with nature, perhaps, which was maybe also during the romantic, when the at that turn also there was a similar obsession with the idea of the ruin, or the kind of encounter of nature and civilization in this sort of destructive way. And I was wondering whether, because I also remember, of course, the kind of project you did with the fifth year students in their collection of residue, and I think you also worked a lot with the idea of the residue, whether that is something that you're thinking about also in terms of the kind of that idea of nature as being the zooming in, zooming out, looking at scales of not similarity, but at looking at the same thing at different scales, like something that's molecular and then moves into possibly landscape ideas. I felt so. I'm just thinking about all this. There are lots to think about when I look at the work. Yeah. What do you think?
I think the thing of the ruin. It isn't as it is. It's definitely present, but I say that I try and come at it from this point of view of what is neglected that I'm interested in. So, and what is neglected ends up in ruin usually. So things that are ruined because they have been neglected. So that's the space that I think I come from. Even when it comes to like having my relationship with animals, for instance, it's like a lot of my friends say a lot of people say that I like animals more than I like humans, but it isn't so much that as much as it is that I feel like it isn't. There aren't enough people doing what needs to be done for the animals as much as, this is a long debate, but I'm just saying, this is where the sort of, at some level it comes from. So that's where the ruin kind of comes in. And also, I think this anxiety of loss and, which is, I think, which is like inherent to getting close to anything or anyone, it's going to perish. So this whole thing of between permanence and trying to preserve, but knowing you can't, and knowing it's eventually going to things. So then through this whole retracing, I think the stain and these types of the layering of time sort of becomes takes center stage in what I do. And the other part of what you were saying was micro macro. Yeah, no, that's also like something I like. It's always like this thing of synchronicity is always something that, where something I'd watched something on YouTube about how this synchronicity also happens. I don't know, of like, when something just clicks at various levels. And that's how even these idioms and stuff work as well. No, it's like some random sentence, and then you're able to connect it to various experiences in life and out of context, and it just kind of fits. So like those ahas are kind of nice, because I think I even philosophically, like this idea of a universal, again, it's tough to talk about these things at a in such a short conversation because it's so complicated. But like I do think that there is a sense of, something that connects and ties everything up together and sort of it kind of happens at various levels. So yeah. So it's also trying to, another thing is that, like, one doesn't always get the experience of, experiencing a large thing without experiencing the small event, So it's like if we just see how water behaves, we would anticipate what what the water is capable of doing when it floods, So it's like this kind of zooming in, zooming out. So yeah.
Thanks, Veda.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is an absolutely wonderful talk, and I think everyone here loved seeing your work.
Thank you.
And I'm looking forward to checking out the text you've written as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Shravan. Thanks, Sushmita, for being here. And thanks, Veda, for adding some thing to our lives, because we are so full of architecture and this, and the idea of the making and the building that is, it's nice to take a from that. Thank you so much, Veda.
Yeah, thank you so
It's
much
nice
for
having you.
inviting me.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.